I was shot right in front of my own house. For 25 minutes, I was clinically dead. My heart had stopped beating. But I wasn't floating in some dark, empty void like you see in the movies. I was somewhere else. A place where I was shown what actually matters in this life and who gets to go home when it's all over. It was just a normal Tuesday. You know the kind. The sun was setting, painting the whole sky in these streaks of orange and purple. I was sitting on my front porch, just breathing it all in. My mind was a million miles away, juggling thoughts about the mortgage payment, my daughter's soccer practice on Thursday, the big game on Sunday, just normal, everyday stuff. The kind of stuff you take for granted. And then everything shattered. It happened so fast I heard shouting down the street. A car screeched, the sound of rubber burning on asphalt. It felt like someone had changed the channel in my life without warning. Before I could even stand up, before I could even process what was happening, there was a crack. A loud pop that didn't sound real. I felt a strange, burning heat in my chest. Not like a fire, but like a hot poker being pressed right through me. I looked down and saw this dark, wet spot blooming on my t-shirt. My knees just gave out. The last thing I saw was the perfect blue of the evening sky slowly fading to gray. And then nothing. Before all that, I guess you could say I was asleep. Not literally, of course. I was busy. I was always busy. I had a decent job in sales, a mortgage that felt like a monster I had to feed every month, and a family I loved more than anything. On paper, I was living the dream. I had the 2-car garage, the manicured lawn, the weekend barbecues. I was checking all the boxes, but inside I was running on empty. Each day felt the same. The alarm would go off at 6 a.m., and this wave of, not sadness, but just heaviness would wash over me. I'd put on a smile for my wife, pack my daughter's lunch, and then sit in traffic for an hour listening to people on the radio yell about politics. It was like I was watching a movie of my own life instead of actually living it. My job was all about numbers and targets. I was good at it. I could sell ice to an Eskimo, my boss used to say. But every handshake, every closed deal just felt hollow. I'd sit in my gray cubicle under those buzzing fluorescent lights staring at a spreadsheet and I'd think, is this it? Is this what I'm supposed to be doing with my one shot at life? I was chasing a bonus to pay for things I didn't have time to enjoy. And the worst part, the part that really kept me up at night, was how it bled into my life at home. I was there, physically, but my mind was a million miles away. I remember my little girl, Sarah, showing me a drawing she made at school. Her eyes were so bright, so proud. I glanced at it and said, "That's beautiful, sweetie," and went right back to scrolling through emails on my phone. I saw the light in her eyes just dim a little. That image haunted me. I was a ghost in my own house. I thought success was about climbing a ladder. A bigger title, a nicer car, a vacation we could post pictures of to prove how happy we were. I was so focused on the destination that I didn't realize I wasn't even on the right road. I was searching for something, a feeling of peace, of purpose, but I was looking in all the wrong places. But what happened next was even worse. Or maybe it was the best thing that ever could have happened to me, because it finally woke me up. What do you think is the biggest thing we take for granted in our daily lives? Let me know in the comments. And if this story is speaking to you, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell, because what I learned on the other side is something everyone needs to hear. Looking back, it's funny. The universe was practically screaming at me, waving these giant red flags right in my face. But I was too busy, checked out to even notice. The signs were all there, starting about a week before it happened. It began as this weird feeling, a low hum of anxiety that I couldn't shake. I'd be in a meeting, staring at a PowerPoint presentation, and suddenly this cold dread would just wash over me for no reason. I told myself it was just the pressure from work, the stress of hitting my quarterly numbers. I'd just grab another cup of coffee and push the feeling down. But it kept coming back, this little whisper in the back of my mind saying something's wrong. Then, a couple of days later, I was driving home on the freeway. I was on the phone, one of those hands-free calls, but still not really paying attention. I was arguing with a client about a contract detail, and out of nowhere, a beat-up pickup truck swerved hard into my lane. There was no signal, no warning. Just a wall of rusted metal right where I was a second before. I slammed on the brakes. My car fishtailed, and for a split second I saw the concrete median rushing toward me. Everything went into slow motion. I remember the squeal of the tires, the smell of burning rubber, the way my heart felt like it was trying to punch its way out of my chest. I managed to regain control, my car coming to a stop just inches from the wall. The truck just kept going, disappearing into traffic. I sat there for a minute, my hands shaking so hard I couldn't grip the steering wheel. But what did I do? I took a deep breath, ended my call, and just kept driving. I had to get home for dinner. I chalked it up to just another crazy driver. Another sign completely ignored. But the one that really gets me, the one that still ties my stomach in knots, happened the night before. I was tucking Sarah into bed. She was quiet that night, just looking at me with these big, serious eyes. I kissed her forehead and went to turn off her lamp when she grabbed my hand. Her little fingers squeezed mine. "Daddy," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Please don't go to work tomorrow." I smiled. "I have to, sweetie. Daddy has to go make the donuts." It was our little joke. But she didn't laugh. Her expression was dead serious. "I had a bad dream," she said. "There was a loud noise, and you fell down." A chill went right through me. A real ice-cold shiver. But I did what any parent would do. I pushed it away. I couldn't let her see me worried. "It was just a dream, baby girl," I said, stroking her hair. "Everything's going to be okay. I promise." I tucked her in tighter, turned on her nightlight, and closed the door, leaving my daughter and her warning alone in the dark. The next morning, that Tuesday, I felt that same dread as I was getting my coffee. I reached for my favorite mug, the one Sarah had painted for me for Father's Day. It had a lopsided picture of me and her holding hands. As I grabbed it, my hand slipped. The mug fell to the tile floor and didn't just break. It exploded. It shattered into 100 tiny pieces. I just stood there staring at the porcelain shards scattered across the floor. The little painted version of me was split right in two. Any one of those things, just a weird coincidence, right? Bad luck. But all of them, one after the other, it was a warning. It was the universe telling me to stop, to pay attention, to stay home. But I just sighed, swept up the pieces, and poured my coffee into a different cup. I had a life to live, a schedule to keep. Or so I thought. Have you ever had a gut feeling that something terrible was about to happen, but you ignored it? Let me know in the comments below. And if you want to hear what happened when I walked out that door, make sure you subscribe and hit that notification bell. You won't believe how my story ends, or rather, how it began again. I walked out the front door, leaving the pieces of my favorite mug in the trash can. The evening air was calm, warm. The sky was that perfect shade of bruised purple and soft orange you only get on a clear day. I sat down on the top step of my porch, the concrete still warm from the afternoon sun, and just tried to breathe. I told myself the anxiety, the broken mug, Sarah's dream, it was all just static, just noise. I was trying so hard to convince myself it was just another Tuesday. That's when I heard it, shouting. It started a few houses down, sharp and angry. I couldn't make out the words, just the raw aggression in the voices. A car door slammed, then another. My neighborhood was quiet. This kind of thing just didn't happen here. I felt that cold dread from the morning creep back up my spine, wrapping around my throat. I should have gone inside. I should have locked the door and called the police. But I just sat there, frozen like a deer caught in headlights. A car peeled out, tires screaming against the asphalt. The sound was violent, ripping through the evening peace. It was a dark sedan, and it was flying down the street, heading right past my house. And then I saw another figure running after it. He had something in his hand. It all happened in a blur, a chaotic slideshow of images my brain couldn't assemble fast enough. And then came the pop. It wasn't a deafening bang like in the movies. It was a sharp cracking sound, like a firecracker, but heavier, meaner. For a split second, I didn't even connect it to me. It was just another sound in the chaos. Then I felt it. A sudden violent shove in my chest, like someone had punched me with all their might. It knocked the wind right out of me. It was followed by a searing heat that spread through my torso like hot liquid being poured inside me. My first thought wasn't I've been shot. It was just confusion. I looked down at my shirt, a plain gray t-shirt I'd had for years. A small dark circle was blooming right over my heart. It got bigger and bigger, turning a deep, wet crimson. It didn't seem real. It felt like I was watching it happen to someone else on a screen. My legs just stopped working. They turned to jelly, and I crumpled forward, my hands scraping against the rough concrete of the porch steps. The world started to tilt sideways. The sounds of the street, the car speeding away, the distant sirens that were just starting to wail began to sound like they were coming from underwater. Everything was muffled and slow. My last thoughts weren't about my career or the mortgage or the car I was so proud of. All I could see was Sarah's face, her big, serious eyes as she begged me not to go to work. "I had a bad dream, Daddy. You fell down." I had promised her everything would be okay. I had promised. A wave of regret so powerful it was more painful than the fire in my chest washed over me. I was a ghost in my own house, and now I was going to be one for real. I tried to take a breath, but my lungs wouldn't work. The beautiful sunset sky above me started to get fuzzy around the edges. The vibrant colors bled into a dull, flat gray. The world was shrinking, closing in on me until it was just a tiny pinprick of light. And then the light went out. There was no tunnel, no final montage of my life, just a sudden, complete, and total silence. My heart gave one last, tired beat, and then it stopped. But the nothingness, it wasn't nothing. It wasn't an end. It was just a pause, a breath. For a moment, there was just quiet, a deep, profound silence that was more peaceful than anything I had ever known. The burning in my chest was gone. The fear, the regret, all of it just vanished. Then I felt a gentle pull. Not a physical pull, but a shift in my awareness. It was like I was waking up from a dream I didn't know I was in. I was still there on my porch, but I was also not. I could see my body lying there on the concrete steps, a crumpled shape under the fading light of the sunset. It looked so small, so fragile, but I didn't feel any attachment to it. It was like looking at an old coat I'd just taken off. There was no pain, no panic. I wasn't a ghost floating around. It was more like I had just stepped out of a noisy, crowded room into a quiet, open field. I could feel the chaos I'd left behind, the sirens getting closer, the neighbors starting to peek out their doors, but it all sounded distant, like a TV playing in another house. It wasn't my problem anymore. I was separate. I was free. And that's when the light started. It didn't come from a specific direction. It was just there, all around me. It wasn't a blinding, harsh light, but a warm, golden glow like the inside of a candle flame. It felt alive. It hummed with a feeling I can only describe as pure, unconditional love. It was a love that knew every mistake I'd ever made, every selfish thought I'd ever had, and it didn't matter. I was accepted. I was home. My life, my worries about the mortgage, my job, my identity as David, it all just melted away into this incredible warmth. All that was left was the core of me, the part that had been buried under all that stress and responsibility. There was no up or down, no past or future. There was only this perfect peaceful now. And in the center of that light, in the heart of that silence, I felt a presence. I couldn't see it, but I knew it was there. It was ancient and all-knowing, but also incredibly gentle. The communication wasn't in words. It was a direct understanding, a flow of knowledge straight into my soul. And I understood that I wasn't here to be judged. I was here to learn. Have you ever felt a sense of peace so complete it made you forget all your worldly problems? Tell me about it in the comments. And you're going to want to subscribe and hit that bell, because what this presence showed me next is the single most important thing I will ever share. It's about who really gets to go home when this life is over. In that place of perfect, silent warmth, the presence made itself known. There was no face, no booming voice from the clouds. It was a feeling, an understanding that was poured directly into me like water into a sponge. It was a feeling of being known completely and utterly, and being loved not in spite of my flaws, but with them. I knew with a certainty that went beyond faith that I was in the presence of God, and He wasn't there to judge me. He was there to show me. My life didn't flash before my eyes like a movie. It was something far more profound. I was shown my life not from my perspective, but from the perspective of every single person I had ever interacted with. I felt the brief annoyance of the barista when I was short with her over my coffee order. I felt the warmth in my wife's heart when I'd bring her flowers for no reason. And then I felt it. I was standing in Sarah's little bedroom again. I felt the hope in her chest as she held up her drawing for me to see. And then I felt the sharp, quiet sting of disappointment when I gave it a quick glance and went back to my phone. It wasn't a punishment, it was just truth. I was being shown the ripples I had created in the pond of life, both the good and the bad. And then the real lesson began. The presence showed me that heaven isn't a place you get into with a golden ticket. It doesn't have one single gate with a guard checking a list. It has countless doors. And He showed me 4 groups of people, 4 kinds of souls, who always find their way through one of them. The first group He showed me were the true forgivers. I saw souls who had been betrayed in the worst ways imaginable. People who had every right to be filled with hate, but instead of holding on to that poison, they had let it go. I saw a man who had been cheated out of his life savings by his best friend. In his life, he never got justice, but he chose to forgive. And as I watched, I saw these heavy, rusted chains around his soul just turn to dust and fall away. The presence made me understand that forgiveness wasn't a gift you gave to your enemy. It was the key that unlocked your own prison cell. Then He showed me the second group, the silent servants. These weren't the people who wrote big checks and had their names on buildings. These were the souls who did good when no one was watching. I saw a nurse who held the hand of a dying patient who had no family. A teenager who secretly left a bag of groceries on the porch of an elderly neighbor every week. A man who stopped on the side of a busy highway to gently move a turtle to safety. Their acts were small, unseen by the world, but they were like giant shining beacons in that place. Their love wasn't a performance. It was a quiet, constant hum that echoed through the universe. The third door belonged to the grateful hearts. This one really hit me. I saw people who had next to nothing, people who were sick, struggling, and in pain. But they were the ones who found joy in the smallest things. A woman in a hospital bed, smiling as she felt the warmth of the sun on her arm through the window. A man who had lost his job, closing his eyes and truly tasting the hot coffee his wife had made him as if it were the most precious gift on earth. And the present showed me that gratitude wasn't about thanking God for what you have. It was the frequency, the vibration that tuned your soul to the frequency of heaven itself, no matter your circumstances. But the fourth group was the one that shattered everything I thought I knew about God, religion, and the afterlife. I was braced for something I could understand, something I'd read in a book or heard in a church. But it wasn't like that at all. The fourth group was the humble seekers. I saw people from every culture, every religion, every corner of the earth. I saw Christians, Muslims, Jews, Buddhists, Hindus, and I saw atheists and agnostics. It didn't matter what they called themselves. It didn't matter if they had the right answers. What mattered was the sincerity of their search. These were the people who admitted when they were wrong. The ones who fell down, messed up, but got back up and tried with all their heart to be a little better than they were the day before. The scientists looking at the stars with awe. The artist trying to capture a piece of beauty on a canvas. The mother trying to patiently answer her child's endless questions. God wasn't looking at the name on the door of their temple or church. He was looking at the hunger for truth, for goodness, for connection, inside their hearts. In that moment, all my human ideas about who was in and who was out just dissolved into nothing. The only thing that mattered was love. Pure, simple, active love. And as I was absorbing this incredible truth, I felt a gentle pull. The brilliant warm light began to recede, not unkindly, but with a sense of purpose. It was a feeling of being told, without words. It's not your time. Your lesson is over. Now go live it. Which of these 4 paths do you feel you're walking on right now? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And please, if this story means something to you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Because what happened when I woke up, and how I tried to apply these lessons in a world that hadn't changed at all, that's a whole other story. As this understanding washed over me, this profound truth about love and forgiveness, I felt a sense of completion. I didn't want to leave. Why would anyone? All the struggles of my life, the stress, the constant feeling of not being good enough, it was all gone. Here in this warm, golden light, I was just me. And that was enough. I wanted to stay in that peace forever. I felt a sort of quiet plea form in my soul, a silent prayer to just let me rest here. But the presence seemed to sense my desire, and the feeling it sent back wasn't a refusal, but a gentle correction. The communication flowed into me, clear as a bell. This peace is not an escape. It is a destination you build, brick by brick, in the world you left behind. And then the final message, the one that changed everything. Your lesson is over. Now go live it. It wasn't a command, it was a gift. A second chance. I understood then that I wasn't being kicked out of heaven. I was being sent on the most important mission of my life. And then I felt the pull. It started as a gentle tug, like a string tied to the center of my being, pulling me back from the light. The warmth began to recede. The profound silence was slowly replaced by a faint, distant hum. I tried to hold on, to stay in that perfect place, but it was like trying to hold on to water. The feeling of being known and loved didn't leave me, but it was being packed away, a memory to carry with me. The golden light shrank, pulling away until it was just a pinprick, and then it was gone. I was falling, tumbling back into the cold and the dark. The return was violent. It was nothing like the gentle exit I'd made. It was a slam, a crash. 1 second I was pure consciousness, and the next I was being shoved back into a broken machine. The first thing that hit me was the pain, an all-consuming, white-hot agony that started in my chest and exploded through every nerve in my body. It felt like my soul was being forced through a keyhole. Then came the sounds. A frantic, high-pitched beeping that drilled into my skull, shouting, voices urgent and muffled swimming around me. I forced my eyes open. The first thing I saw was a blinding, sterile white light. Not the warm, golden light from before, but the harsh, fluorescent glare of a hospital ceiling. A face appeared above me, covered by a blue mask. The eyes were wide, filled with a mix of shock and exhaustion. I heard a voice cut through the chaos. "We've got a pulse! He's back! He's back!" I tried to take a breath and my lungs burned as if I were inhaling fire. My body felt impossibly heavy. A lead suit I couldn't move, but I was breathing. I was feeling. I was alive. The miracle wasn't that I had died and gone somewhere beautiful. The miracle was that I had been sent back to try again. If you were given a second chance, a complete do-over on how you live your life, what's the very first thing you would change? Let me know in the comments. And if you want to know how I took these lessons and tried to rebuild a life that was worthy of that second chance, make sure you subscribe and hit that bell. The hardest part wasn't coming back to life. It was learning how to truly live. Waking up was like being born, but without any of the gentleness. One moment I was pure spirit, bathed in a love that healed every broken part of me. The next I was slammed back into my body with the force of a car crash. Pain was the first thing to greet me. A deep, searing fire in my chest where the bullet had been. It was a brutal welcome back to the world of the living. My eyes fluttered open to the harsh reality of a hospital ceiling. The light wasn't golden and warm. It was a cold, fluorescent white. The silence wasn't peaceful. It was filled with the frantic, rhythmic beeping of machines that were keeping me tethered to this world. A doctor with tired eyes leaned over me, his voice sounding distant and distorted. "David, can you hear me? You're in the hospital. You've been shot." I wanted to tell him I knew. I wanted to tell him where I'd been, but all I could manage was a weak groan. My body felt like a cage I'd been locked back inside of. My wife, Amy, was the first person I truly saw. She was sitting by the bed, her face pale and etched with lines of worry I'd never noticed before. When she saw my eyes were open, a sound escaped her lips, a mix between a sob and a gasp of relief. She grabbed my hand, and her touch was like an anchor, real and solid. I could see the terror she had been through in the dark circles under her eyes. But here's the thing. The old me would have been focused on my own pain. The new me, the me that had come back, felt her pain. I felt the hours she had sat there not knowing if her husband would ever wake up. And I was filled with a love for her so profound it hurt more than the hole in my chest. Then they let Sarah in, my little girl. She stood hesitantly at the door, so small in this big, sterile room. Her eyes were wide, scared of all the tubes and wires connected to me. When our eyes met, she ran to the bed and buried her face in my arm, careful not to touch my chest. "You came back, Daddy," she whispered. "You promised." And in that moment I understood. Her dream wasn't just a dream. It was a connection, a warning. And my promise to her, it had somehow echoed all the way to the other side and pulled me back. That was the first real shock, realizing the connections we have are far more powerful than we can ever imagine. But adjusting was harder than I could have imagined. The world felt wrong, was too loud. The news on the TV in the corner of my room, people arguing about politics, the nurses chatting in the hallway. It all felt like meaningless noise compared to the perfect silence I had known. Food had no taste. The physical therapy was agony. Quote, "Everything about being human felt clumsy and heavy. I had been weightless, and now I was trapped by gravity again." People would visit, friends from work, neighbors. They'd talk about my bad luck and how crazy the world was getting. They meant well, but they had no idea. They were all still asleep, just like I had been. The biggest change, though, was happening inside me. One afternoon, a young, overworked nurse was changing my bandages. She was rough, distracted, and clearly having a bad day. The old me would have been annoyed, maybe even made a sarcastic comment. But instead, I just looked at her. I saw the exhaustion in her face. I saw the weight she was carrying. And I remembered the silent servants. I felt nothing but compassion for her. "Thank you," I said, my voice hoarse. "I know you're busy. I really appreciate you." She stopped, looked at me, and her whole expression softened. A small smile touched her lips. "You're welcome," she said, and for the first time she looked at me like a person, not just a patient in bed 304. That was the moment I knew I hadn't just come back to my old life. I'd been sent back to start a new one. If you suddenly saw the world through a completely different lens, how do you think you'd handle the little everyday frustrations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And please subscribe and turn on that bell, because trying to explain what happened to me and convincing my family that I wasn't crazy, that was the next impossible mountain I had to climb. Getting out of the hospital felt like stepping onto a different planet. My house, the one I'd spent a decade working to pay for, felt like a stranger's home. The photos on the wall were of a man I barely recognized, a guy with a forced smile, his eyes somewhere else. Always thinking about the next sales target, the next commission check. That man was gone. I walked past the mail on the kitchen counter and saw a bill from our mortgage company. Before, that envelope would have tied my stomach in a knot. Now it was just paper. It had no power over me anymore. The first few weeks were quiet. I was healing, physically. But the real change was happening in the silence between moments. One evening, my wife Amy found me just sitting in the living room in the dark. She sat down next to me, her expression a mix of love and deep worry. She thought I had PTSD from the shooting. She wasn't wrong, but it was so much more than that. "David," she said softly, her voice breaking a little, "talk to me. You're here, but you feel a million miles away." I turned to her, and for the first time I didn't put up a wall. I didn't say I'm fine. I took her hands, and the truth just poured out of me. I told her everything. Not just about the light and the presence, but about the life before. I told her I was sorry. Sorry for all the dinners where I was on my phone. Sorry for all the times she tried to talk to me and I just nodded along, my mind on a spreadsheet. I was a ghost, Amy, I told her, the tears finally coming. I was a ghost in our own house, and it took dying to realize I wasn't even living. She started to cry too, but it wasn't out of sadness. She leaned forward and held me, and I felt years of distance between us just melt away. She was finally getting her husband back. But the biggest proof, the thing that showed me this change was real, came a few days later. I was in the backyard with Sarah. She was showing me a roly-poly bug she'd found. explaining its entire life story with the intense seriousness only a 7-year-old can have. The old me would have been gone in 30 seconds looking for a distraction, an email to answer, but I just knelt there in the grass watching this tiny bug crawl across her little hand, and I listened. I listened to every single word as if it were the most important secret in the universe. She looked up at me, her eyes shining, and gave me this huge, beaming smile. And I felt it, that lesson of the grateful hearts. I wasn't grateful for a big house or a fancy car. I was grateful for a little girl and a bug on a Tuesday afternoon. It was the richest I had ever felt in my entire life. That feeling led to the first truly insane decision I made. The next Monday morning, my boss called. He was checking in, but he was really asking when his top salesman would be back. He started talking about a huge new client, about the bonus I was on track to get. The words just sounded like noise. They had no meaning. I took a deep breath and said, "Steve, I'm not coming back." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. He thought I was joking. He tried to offer me more money, a better title. I just calmly told him that my life wasn't for sale anymore. When I hung up, I felt a terror that was quickly replaced by a profound sense of freedom. I had no job, I had no plan. But for the first time, I had a purpose. My mission wasn't to stand on a corner and preach. It was simpler. It was to live the lessons I'd been shown. And the first one was forgiveness. Through a news article, I found out the bullet that hit me was a stray. It came from a gun fired by an 18-year-old kid during a gang fight. A kid named Marcus, who is now facing decades in prison. The old me would have wanted him to pay for what he did to me, to my family. But all I could see were those rusted chains from my vision. So I did something I never told a soul about. I wrote a letter. Not to him, but to the judge. I told them that I forgave him. I told them that whatever happened to make an 18-year-old boy pick up a gun, I was a victim of that, just as much as he was. I wasn't freeing him from jail. I was freeing myself from the prison of hate. My life looks completely different now. We had to sell the big house. I drive a 10-year-old car. I make a living doing odd jobs and handyman work in the neighborhood. I don't make a lot of money, but I make breakfast for my daughter every morning. I hold my wife's hand when we watch a movie. I'm present. And I started sharing this story right here, because I believe the message wasn't just for me. It was for anyone who feels like they're running on empty, for anyone who thinks, is this all there is? I'm here to tell you it's not. There's so much more, and you don't have to die to find it. If you had the chance to live by just one of those 4 principles, forgiveness, service, gratitude, or seeking, which one would you choose to focus on first? Let me know in the comments. And if this story has touched you in any way, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. I have so many more stories to share about the small miracles that happen when you start living a life of purpose. The doctors called me a miracle. They used words like improbable and lucky. They talked about the skill of the surgeons and the speed of the paramedics, but they missed the real miracle. The miracle wasn't that I survived a bullet. The miracle was understanding what I survived for. It was being given the answers to the biggest questions in the universe and then being sent back, not with a perfect life, but with a perfect map. That message, that profound and simple truth I was shown in the light, it wasn't just for me. I know that with every fiber of my being. It's for anyone who feels lost, anyone running on that same hamster wheel I was on, chasing things that leave you feeling more empty than when you started. You don't have to go where I went to learn how to live. The lessons are all around you, hiding in plain sight. You just have to choose to see them. It really is that simple. To forgive not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. To serve quietly without needing a thank you or a round of applause. To feel gratitude for the warmth of your coffee, for the sound of rain, for the simple fact that you are breathing right now. And to keep seeking to stay humble, to admit when you're wrong. And to try with all your heart to be a little bit better today than you were yesterday. That's it. That's the whole game. This story found its way to you today for a reason. There are no accidents. The universe is always whispering to us. We just have to get quiet enough to hear it. So I have to ask you, what do you think your life is trying to tell you right now? If you had to pick just one of those 4 paths, forgiveness, quiet service, gratitude, or humble seeking to truly focus on starting tomorrow, which one would it be? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. And if this story has meant something to you, please subscribe and hit that notification bell. I was sent back with a purpose, and part of that is sharing these stories, these small miracles that happen when you finally wake up. I have so many more to tell.